if you want to ask me some questions maybe at the end about Beethoven, and if you play some of his pieces, if you're interested in that, I will be more than happy to answer. But today we will be talking about Beethoven and how he was actually a huge innovator in classical music, and how he innovated music in general. So, um, as you all know, I'm just wondering if you can tell me like what it is you guys know about Beethoven. If you want, you can put it in the chat if there's something that you know about Beethoven. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so Beethoven, one of the world's most famous composers, was born in 1770 in Bonn, Germany. So it's actually a pretty small town, and the town is encompassed by the Rhine River. So I'm sure that that river was actually inspiration to some of his pieces at the time. So he was baptized on December the 17th, and as most of you know Beethoven as just mainly a composer, but he was also not only a composer, he was also a very famous pianist, a very well-known organist, violinist, pedagogue, and lyricist. Okay, so during his 57 years of life, back then actually that wasn't for now it's like a pretty short lifespan, but back then that was a pretty long lifespan, and he actually became famous. But throughout his lifetime, he was often very misunderstood by the audience. He was misunderstood by, like the people who he worked for, and there were lots of reasons for that because he was always in advance. He was much more in advance of his time. So how was he in advance of his time? He was just like his brain was like completely somewhere else, and he was always pushing for something new. Like I was talking to one of my students the other day about Beethoven, and she basically said that Beethoven was like the Beatles of today. So he was very, very innovative and actually very fascinating person, and we will explore more about him. So one of the things that was really interesting about him was, for example, when I went to Vienna a few years ago, I found out that there were 60 places of living where he lived in Vienna. So basically, he would change apartments like all the time. One of the reasons was because I think the patrons who he was working for were basically paying his rent, so maybe he was changing patrons. And another reason was that he wasn't getting along with people, and a lot of the times people said that he wouldn't care at all about his environment, living environment. He was very careless, very eccentric. And one of the reasons why he was so difficult was because he was already, as a young man, he was already deaf, and that led to a lot of frustrations in his life. Okay, so Beethoven, like interesting thing is, instead of like on top of a composer, he was also a teacher, a pedagogue. So who would he teach piano to? So mostly who he taught piano to were all these noble people, nobility, and a lot of the times there were princes and princesses, and sometimes he would often like fall in love with these princesses. And one of them was Giulietta Giacardi, but of course things wouldn't work out because they were richer than him, and he was just a poor musician and not really that wealthy. So he dedicated his Moonlight Sonata, Opus 27, number 2, to her. So did any of you ever hear the Moonlight Sonata? If you can answer me in my chat, you can tell me if you ever heard of Moonlight Sonata. So basically, this Moonlight Sonata is about his frustrations and his emotions for this woman, and like how things never worked out in the relationship. Okay, so let's move on. So Beethoven was pretty much an entrepreneur during his time, and he worked under the patronage system. So the patronage system, basically, he would write pieces for wealthy people who would sponsor his music. So it's similar to today. So today, we have commissions. So also like people commission composers to write music. But basically back then, a lot of composers were either tied to a church or they were tied to courts, and they had permanent places of employment, but Beethoven never had a permanent place of employment. So in that way, he was very entrepreneurial, very innovative. And some of his patrons at the time were Archduke Rudolf, the youngest son of Leopold II, the Belgian king, then Prince Kinsky and Prince Lobkowitz, as well as Count Waldstein. So often he would dedicate his works to these people. For example, there's the famous Waldstein Piano Sonata number 21, or the Archduke Trio Opus 97. Okay, so I have some pictures here that I can show you about Beethoven as a young man and throughout his life. So I will just share the screen. Just a second. So here we go. So pictures of Beethoven throughout his life. This is really interesting. So this is Beethoven as a young man, 13-year-old Beethoven, 23-year-old Beethoven, this picture by Horneman. Here, he was already, in 1819, he was already like older man. And we even have a picture of Beethoven on his deathbed, which is really interesting, in 1827. And then there's some pictures of some people in Beethoven's life. Beethoven's mother, Stephen von Browning, one of Beethoven's lifelong friends. I can also increase the picture if you guys want. Here you go. Maybe that's easier to see than this small. Anton Schindler, who wrote the first major biography of Beethoven. Sorry, this picture is a little bit small. And pictures of important places in Beethoven's life. This is the house where he was born on the 16th December of 1717 in Bonn. Then Beethoven's study. This is also very interesting. What I found one of the most interesting things. So his piano, his music, chair, kind of a little bit messy, still beautiful view outside. Then Beethoven's funeral, which was attended by 20,000 people. Where it just shows how much he was famous during the time. Yeah. Okay, and then here, one more time, his piano that he played on. And the organ on which he learned how to play. Okay, and that's that for the pictures for today of Beethoven's pictures. Okay, so let me just stop the share. Okay, so let's move on. He created an enormous output of music. Basically, he created almost 722 works. And there's another, I'm going to share the screen again. Here's going to be the list of his most important works. Just a second. So what do you know by Beethoven? What works do you get? If you want, you can put in the chat. Okay, so here, the most important works of Beethoven. Just a second. I'm going to scroll down. And you can also read this article here. Sorry, just a second. Some problems here.
C'est pas vraiment un concert, je vois.
Septet Opus 20. Then we have the Moonlight Sonata Opus number 7. Hugely famous piece. Pathetic Sonata number 8, Opus 30. Do any of you know the Pathetic Sonata, or have you ever played it? Famous piece full of pathos, very famous. Then Adelaide Opus 46, most popular song. The Eroica Symphony, Opus 55.
Je pense que ça elle parle d'une application de Beethoven, je pense.
Sorry, I don't speak French. Okay, the Fifth Symphony, Opus 67. Fidelio, Opus 72. That was only opera. The Emperor Piano Concerto, Opus 73. The fifth piano. He wrote 5 piano concertos. That was the 5th one. Missa Solemnis, Opus 123. Choral Symphony, Opus 125. Grand Fugue, Opus 133, etc. So he wrote. These are the most famous ones. He wrote a lot of music. Okay. So yeah, basically last year, even though this was the COVID pandemic year, it marked. Oh, okay. You Moon Sonata is pretty hard to find him to join for release. Yes, it's actually Moonlight Sonata is pretty hard, but it's manageable. I think the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata is not that hard. Second movement is okay. Third movement is actually very hard. Like I played it during my undergraduate years, and it's very challenging. But I think the third movement basically represents his feelings for that woman. He was so frustrated with like not being able to be with her, and that was really interesting. Okay, so so last year because of COVID, we couldn't do a lot, but basically that was a celebration of Beethoven's 250th birthday. So like a lot of performers all over the world took to performing and playing Beethoven's works. So Jonathan Biss, one of the world's most famous pianists, basically he immersed in the project of his sonatas. So he played and performed them. And then Stephen Hugh recorded 5 piano concertos, and then Myro quartets also recorded the complete Beethoven string quartets. Okay, so now we will take a look at the YouTube video of what Beethoven's hometown of Bonn is doing and how they're celebrating his 250th birthday. So I'm going to share the screen again after I find this video. Just a second.
The year 2020 is the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's birth, and Germany is ready to celebrate, but nowhere more so than his hometown of Bonn.
This great big story was made possible by the German National Tourist Board.
Beethoven lived more than 22 years in Bonn, and there are many places here that are associated with Beethoven. My name is Malte Böker. I'm the director of the Beethoven House. We're in front of the Beethoven House, Beethoven's birthplace in 1770, and it's considered one of the best visited music museums in the world. I'm standing in front of the Beethoven Monument, and it's the first monument dedicated to Beethoven ever, and we are very proud to have it here in Bonn. This is one of 22 installations, and this is our form of presenting the Beethoven city, Bonn, to the world. I think he'd be pretty happy to see that his music is still relevant, is still performed, and he would encourage us to look to the future.
Interesting, huh?
The city of Bonn during the day is beautiful, but at night, it really shines. In honor of Beethoven's 250th anniversary, the city of Bonn in Germany is lighting up the night with some installations inspired by him and his works.
Ich bin Nils R. Schulze, Lichtkünstler aus Berlin.
Mein Name ist Felix Müller und ich bin Künstler und Gestalter.
Wir haben insgesamt 10 Installationen in Bonn verteilt. Wir haben ein Konzept gemacht, dass man fußläufig zu all den Installationen kommt.
Die Diskokugel im Hofgarten ist dicht angelehnt an Beethoven als Musiker. Bei den Installationen mit dem großen Ballons, da ist die Intention gewesen, dieser jugendliche, stürmerische Geist Beethovens über die Stadt zu erheben und in die weite Welt zu fliegen.
Die Leute haben ganz verschieden reagiert. Also jeder hat ein anderes Lieblingsobjekt. Ich habe keine Lieblingsinstallation, sondern irgendwie habe ich mich in alle irgendwie verliebt.
From sight to sound, one woman is uniting with composers across the globe to curate and perform 250 original compositions inspired by Beethoven's work.
Having Bonn in the focus of contemporary composers is the best thing you could give Beethoven as a birthday gift. My name is Susanne Kessel. I'm a concert pianist. I'm organizing and managing the project 250 piano pieces for Beethoven. In 2020, the large Beethoven anniversary will take place. And as a Bonn citizen, I wanted to do a large project for him. I thought of asking 250 composers all over the world for personal commissions for piano pieces that refer to Beethoven's music or his personality or his deafness. All composers were free to do what they like. I always perform other people's music. And this is something that makes me really, really happy, of course, that through Beethoven, people have the connection to new music.
The music continues outside of Bonn with some curious self-playing instruments. Located in Germany, there is a museum of antique self-playing mechanical music instruments where you can hear Beethoven's classical orchestral arrangements played.
I belong to Siegfried's Mechanical Music Cabinet. They were the first possibility to listen to music without the help of a human being. And as a composer, to write music and have it played exactly like you want it to. The oldest instrument is from 1780, and it's a Kleemeyer flute clock. Fairground organ is one of the most favorite. The Rupfeld phonologist Violina plays 6 violins at the same time, together with piano.
Okay, and that's about it for this. Did you guys find this interesting? Oh, I will maximize it. Sorry, the next time I will, for sure. I couldn't see your chat. Sorry about that. Oh, yeah. Okay, Ariana, that's great. When did you hear Yefim Bromfam play all 5 Beethoven piano sonatas? Okay, you guys, so did you find this video interesting? What did you guys think? Is there anybody here that's from like Bonn, from Germany, or somebody who's from Germany that's attending the masterclass? If so, that'll be really interesting. Thanks. Okay, somebody really liked the video. Okay, I thought it was, oh, you are? Oh, great. What town are you from? Oh, great. Is that close to Bonn? Is it close? So did you have a lot of Beethoven celebrations last year? Oh, great. Was there like anything in Berlin to celebrate Beethoven's birthday last year that you know of? There must have been tons of stuff. All right, you guys, let's keep moving. This is really interesting. Now you're interacting. I love interacting. Oh, she says, okay, lots of concerts. That's great. So like, yeah, maybe you can share with us later. Maybe if there's some concerts on YouTube, you can post it in a small world over there in the chat later. Great. Okay. So, okay. So let's talk about a little bit about his family history. So Beethoven didn't have such a beautiful and lovely upbringing. Basically, his father, just like Mozart's father, saw the talent in Beethoven at a very early age, and he wanted to try to exploit his talent, but I don't think he really succeeded, just like Mozart's father did. And basically, his dad was also a musician, but he was an alcoholic. So by the time that Beethoven was 11 years old, he basically had to start working. And by the age of 18, since his father was not really capable of producing for the family, Beethoven became the sole breadwinner. So can you imagine like raising your whole family by the age you're 18? That's not a very beautiful way to, to live your life at such a young age. So basically, he had to quit school and he just had to work. But anyway, the genius that he is, he came out okay. Okay, so this is I'm gonna just share a picture of his father. Just a second. Okay. His father, in my opinion, doesn't look so much like Beethoven. He at least in this picture, he's a little bit short and kind of, I don't know, a little bit small looking. Okay, so there we go. Good. So yeah, as a personality, what do you guys know about Beethoven's personality? Was he like a happy guy, moody guy? What do you guys know? If you can share something, what do you think? Not much. Okay, so this is why you're in this masterclass, to learn how was he like as a person as well, right? So as a person, Beethoven was difficult. Okay, he was difficult. Why was he difficult? Because people say that already by the time that he was like in his middle ages, he started becoming deaf. So can you imagine if you're a composer and that was like basically your reason to live in your way, how you pay all your bills, that you start becoming deaf at such a pretty young age? So I think he was, in general, he was a pretty like frustrated person, and like his music, even though he was a genius, is reflects that. His music was pretty moody. It often went from like a super happy, like music to like some kind of like sad music. Like it kept jumping all over the place. But basically, here it says that even as a young man, he was very headstrong, and he would never like bow to authority. He always wanted to, he always wanted to basically have his own way, kind of thing. And as he grew older and the deafness overtook him, his negative aspects of his personality came out. He was increasingly given to periods of despair. The difficulties of the communication made him more reserved, and he became more suspicious and distrustful of others. So his behavior was very erratic, as was his personality. And like we talked about, he didn't stay at one place of living for too long. So can you imagine if you had like 60 apartments since you were like, I don't know, let's say 18 years old until you're 57. So that means you changed like apartments once or twice a year, or even like sometimes even 3 times a year. So that's pretty like dramatic how you would live your life. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit now about his compositional output. Okay, so do you guys know anything about the musical periods of Beethoven and the periods which he wrote in? Anybody? No, not okay. So it's okay, I will talk about it. So there were 3 musical periods under which he composed. So the early period, which stemmed from 1792 to 1802, during this time period, he was the most influenced by Haydn and Mozart, by classical music. So in this period, composers would just mostly stick to certain forms. So, very structured, not a lot of chance of innovation, improvisation, anything like that. Everything had to be done like a certain way. Okay. And some of the most famous compositions from that time were piano sonatas in A flat major, opus 26, and opus 27, again, the famous Moonlight Sonata that we talked about a lot. Okay, and then his middle period from 1802 to 1812, sometimes this period was characterized as a heroic. Here he already started going away from like Mozart and Haydn and developing his individual style. And those were also the years where he increasingly suffered from deafness. And the most famous compositions are Fifth Symphony and Opera Fidelia. Opera Fidelia was Beethoven's only opera. He didn't really delve a lot into opera, but the most famous one. And like, what about the Fifth Symphony? Do you guys know the Fifth Symphony? Has anybody ever heard the Fifth Symphony in concert? Da 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 da. The famous Fate motive at the beginning, right? Like that's one of the most famous, and I've heard in concert. It's just fabulous. So also, like this masterclass, I would really encourage you to guys to go and listen to classical music concerts, and I think it's fabulous to hear classical music live. So if you ever have a chance, I don't know if now, but later on, it's great to listen to not only like popular music, but classical music has a certain kind of effect that's like really great. Okay, so the late period from 1812 to his death in 1827. So here he basically started innovating a lot. He extended his innovations in musical form and expression. And during these years, he was actually completely deaf, and he still composed a lot. So can you imagine if you're a composer and you're completely deaf and you're still composing a lot? And I heard that, for example, like there were differences between Mozart's compositional styles and Beethoven's compositional styles. So Mozart would hear everything in his head, and then he would just go and write down everything he heard in his head on a piece of paper. But for Beethoven, the process was much more arduous. He would basically dwell over every note, on every rest. He would just basically go through that. But it was much, much more difficult than Mozart's. But he was very much a perfectionist in his own. Yeah. Okay. So because he was completely deaf during that time period, he couldn't really converse with people. He couldn't talk to people. And he used notes to talk with people, or his patrons, his colleagues, his students. So I will show you an article where we can see Beethoven's conversations books. And actually these conversations books you can order on Amazon if you're ever interested in something like that. I still haven't read them, but I think it's very interesting. So here you see how his handwriting was very, very messy. Like, just also like I saw scripts of his compositional output. It was also very messy. Here in one of his conversational books, there are notes about house hunting. And here he has written an idea for the beginning with the credo of Mrs. Solemnis in the conversation books next to an address of a dentist. So I think that would be a pretty interesting book to read, you know, like Beethoven's conversation books. Oh, somebody's asking me, will you be blessed of your playing of Beethoven's music? I won't be playing today, but maybe perhaps for the next masterclass we can. But you can always look me up on YouTube, and there is all like with my name and last name. I will give you my name and last name here, and there's this is the Beethoven Opus 22, where you can like listen to me playing the Beethoven. But maybe next time I'll play something. Okay, so sorry about that. So the most famous compositions in this time were Beethoven Symphony No. 9. Did anybody ever hear Beethoven Symphony No. 9, the Choral Symphony? Super famous symphony. Then Mrs. Solemnis, the late string quartets, late piano quartets, as well as the Abeli variations. So this late period is jam-packed with musical genius. Okay, so basically now we are going to analyze a little bit of his music. I don't know how much you guys know how to read music, and this is why I asked at the beginning, do any of you play the piano and like, do you know anything about reading music? But I will just show you slowly in the music score what was his style and what he did and how he innovated everything. Okay, just a second. So I'm just getting to the score. So this is Beethoven's Piano Sonata, Opus 111. I played the sonata during my doctorate degree. It's one of the hardest piano sonatas that ever existed, basically. And okay, so here we go. Are you guys okay with the screen like this? I think it's pretty much maximized. Okay, so here, this is Beethoven's Opus 111 Sonata. So here it says, dedicated to Rudolf Herzig, okay, and then composed in January of 1822. So this was basically 5 years before he died. So one of his latest pieces. So we are, there's 3 flats here. And right from the beginning, I don't know if you guys know what F means, but F means very loud. So this is loud, then another loud. So after that we have F, SF, SF. SF means like to emphasize. So he wants F, F, SF, SF. So very much four markings in a row. So for example, in the classical music period, before he started with this, this was barely allowed. You could maybe have like one F, and then you could have maybe one P here, and that was it. You couldn't like really like have that many. Okay, so also this is called the double dotted rhythm here, from here to here. So double dotted rhythm was also not so common in classical music, but he used it a lot in this sonata. And then after that, after all the F, F, S, F, S, F, there is a P, which is soft. So basically from one measure to the next, he's going from very loud to soft, which was like during the classical music period, that wasn't very common. And then he has a crescendo, again, from soft to loud, a crescendo in between, which was also like within one measure, that was pretty crazy as well. Okay, excuse me. And then after that, again, all these double dotted rhythms, again, the same thing. SF, F, SF, SF, and then back to piano, crescendo, forte. So very, very dramatic opening. So here on the 3rd line, he went from P to PP to sempre PP. So it means soft to very soft to even softer. And then he just kept going softer and softer and softer. Lots of double dotted rhythms here, very, very extreme, very extreme piano writing. And the musical line keeps going down, as you can tell. You see how it's going down. Lots of double dotted rhythms. And here again, after that, there's a crescendo, fortes, forzatos, 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 forzato again, and then back to piano. And all of this kinds of writing, that was just like the first page. So in my experience, this piano sonata is like one of the hardest things that I played. It was very hard to memorize. It took me some time. At the end, I played it, but it was just because of all these so many, different accidentals, so many dramatic things that you had to emphasize. But at the end, it was actually worth to play it because it was a good experience. Okay, good. So I'm happy that I showed this to you guys. Just like one example of his piano writing. Okay, so his other innovations. So Beethoven expanded everything. So everything was bigger, better with Beethoven, as opposed to the other composers of his piano, of his piano period. So he expanded the form, the emotional scope, and the length of nearly every genre he explored. He's most famous for the expansion of the symphony, but he also had a huge influence on the piano sonata, the piano concerto, the violin sonata, and others. So as we already said in like the analysis of the score, and you already saw that, he was the first composer that had PPP and FFF, which is very, really, really soft, really, really, really loud, written in his scores, as well as the SSF, famous forzati, which he would sometimes have like 3 to 5 in a row, which no composer ever did before. Okay. Okay, this is also very interesting. I want to talk a little bit about the development of piano. So what kind of piano or what kind of instrument do you guys think that Beethoven used during his time? Do you think he had like the same kind of piano like we have today, or some other piano? What do you guys think? Do you know anything about that? Did he have like a smaller one? Did he have like any? Nobody knows. Okay, so a piano in his day was called the forte piano. So the forte piano was nothing like the even upright or grand piano that we have today. The forte piano was very flimsy, and it was made out of wood, and you couldn't get a lot of sound out of it. So here I will share a YouTube performance of Moonlight Sonata on a forte piano, and you can tell the difference between the forte piano and the. Here's the YouTube. We'll maximize, try to maximize. Just a second. As you can see, there's not that much sound coming out of it. You can't have that many dynamics. Much smaller piano compared to the one that we have today. And the keys are black and white as opposed to white and black that we have today. He's still really able to bring out the melody at the top, the beautiful melody line. And the keys are much smaller than the keys of today's piano. Yeah. So it's not so easy to maneuver around. Yeah. Okay, there's that. Okay, so let's keep going with this. Okay, so forte piano. So in 1796, when he was 26, Beethoven wrote to a piano manufacturer complaining. He said, "One often thinks that one is merely listening to a harp." So he really didn't like these pianos because his music didn't fit them. His music was way, way more advanced than these pianos could ever give him. So the piano needed to get louder. Basically, during his time, the concert halls were filled with audiences, maybe like over hundreds of people. And today we have our concert halls filled with like thousands of people. So, you know, the piano needed to get bigger to fit this audience. So he didn't make the changes happen of the piano, but he was definitely an encourager, and he wanted a louder piano, and he was losing his hearing, but his music wanted more. Sometimes he would even break the pianos by pounding on them. And the development of the piano over the next 30 years was striking. The English piano manufacturers started making instruments with bigger sound, and it was at a cost. But however, Beethoven didn't really like those pianos. He preferred the Viennese ones because they had a nicer, beautiful touch, and he thought that the English pianos were unplayable. And he said soon before he died, the piano is and remains an inadequate instrument. So the grand piano, like the piano that we use in concerts today, was actually developed in 1825, 2 years before he died. Okay, so basically, like his music now that we hear today, he couldn't even compose on a good piano back then. Okay, so let's take a look at this picture. This is also very interesting. This is the history of the piano, and then you can see all of these different instruments and how the piano developed over the ages. Okay, so I'm just gonna go quickly through this because we don't have that much time. Just a second. So here we have dulcimer first. Then there's the clavichord, then the virginal, spinet, harpsichord, Christopher's pianoforte, piano of Beethoven's period. This was his piano. Upright piano, which looked kind of weird with this like pointy thing on the top. Square grand piano and piano of Lincoln's period. This is today's grand piano. So interesting how the piano developed over the years. Okay, good. Okay, so now, so let's talk about how he influenced the symphony, okay? So Beethoven wrote 9 symphonies. Before Beethoven, like composers wrote lots and lots of different symphonies. For example, Haydn wrote 107, Mozart wrote 50, and like I said, Beethoven wrote only 9. So he tapped into the symphony's potential in a way that no one could ever before. So his symphony number 3, Eroica, is in particular the expanded idea of a symphony. For example, the first movement is 15 to 18 minutes long, which is way longer than anybody ever had in a symphony. So we're going to have to listen to a little bit of the symphony, Eroica Symphony number 3. Just a second, and I will. Sorry, that was the wrong symphony. Okay, so actually, let's because we don't have that much time, we can listen to Beethoven's 9th Symphony. So the 9th Symphony, what do you guys know about the 9th Symphony? It's like the first symphony which Beethoven put the voice in. He put the voice in and lots of different instruments. Okay, so let's listen to the Beethoven's 9th. This is the final, the Otto Joe. Riccardo Muti in Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Very big orchestra with lots and lots of instruments. And also there was a choir. In the background. The famous theme again, the choir. Okay, so that was Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. I heard it once live, and it was one of the most beautiful pieces I've ever seen. Was it made for Napoleon? I don't think so. I think there was another piece that was meant for Napoleon. Somebody's asking me, but no, that one wasn't. This was just like, you know, his own piece. Okay, so basically he enlarged the orchestra in this symphony, the Ninth Symphony. Back in the classical music period, like the orchestra was way smaller. He enlarged, he put in like lots and lots of different instruments, a choir. So this is the way how he innovated the symphony. And he also pushed the boundaries in its form, harmonies, and emotional content. So as you know, the classical music period was very restricted emotionally, but like, you know, during Beethoven, the emotions brought much more scope. They were much wider. Basically, you could do whatever you want emotionally, you know. So okay, so he bridged the gap between the classical and the romantic eras. So Beethoven was on the cutting edge of music, who was the avant-garde of the time. And before Beethoven, there was no romantic era, but after him, few wanted to write in the classical style any longer. So what do you guys know about the romantic era? Do you know anything about what the romantic era meant, like in compared to the classical music era? So romantic era, compared to the classical music era, basically the classical era was much more conservative. You couldn't express a lot, restrained emotion. The emphasis was on clarity and structure. Whereas in the romantic period, you could do much more with your feelings. You could express so much more. Basically, the romantic era was the development of the artist as an individual. So the individual expression. And then after the romantic period, after Beethoven and all that, then it grew more and more in like in modern music that we know today. So basically today in the modern music, you can do whatever you want, okay? So you can trace the transition through the cycle of the 9 symphonies from the first 2, which are modeled on those of Haydn and Mozart. So the first 2 were in the classical music period. Then from the 3rd to 5th, this is where he started going away from Mozart and Haydn. And then basically the 9th symphony is very romantic and very programmatic. So it's very incredibly profound, beautiful, and very skillfully written, okay? So in the romanticism, actually during that time was a literary movement, and it was already established when Beethoven came to be the first and take its ideals and apply them to the way he wrote music. Okay, so most music of the classical era, basically audiences, when they went to hear classical music, they knew what to expect. They knew, you know, what keys the composers would use. Maybe he would start with one key, then he would go to another key and come back to another key. And they exactly knew like some motives or like melodies that would repeat over and over again. They would know the character and the tempo of the piece. So it was very much predictable. But Beethoven broke all of these rules, and not simply for the sake of it, because it was always in the service of whatever he wanted to express, whether it was incredible drama or the most intimate personal sentiments. So in his late periods, he basically broke all forms and all structures, and he just, some of his late piano sonatas and late works in general just basically go from idea to idea you know, just like streams of consciousness, the streams of thoughts, and like basically just to express the music. Like there was no form, no structure, no nothing. So leading to modern music. And this is the heart of what was revolutionary about Beethoven. It was not about God or beauty or what the public wanted to hear. It was about what it was like to be Beethoven and therefore to be human. Okay, so that's really interesting. So this is what romantic music was all about. So do you guys know any other composers who you know and who you're familiar with from the Romantic period? What other composers except? So there was also Liszt, Chopin, right? Mendelssohn, many different Schubert, Schumann, many different composers. Okay, so in the concerto, do you guys know what a concerto is? So concerto is basically when a soloist of any instruments plays with the orchestra. Okay, so as a concerto form, he made lots of formal innovations. He wrote 5 piano concertos and 7 violin concertos. So one of the biggest things that he did with the concerto was that he basically he scripted out the cadenza. So he before that if you I don't know if you know what a cadenza is. Cadenza was improvised. So cadenza is like the solo part that the soloist goes to, and they just start improvising at a certain point in music. But Beethoven changed all of this, and he basically wrote out the cadenza, and he said that this is where you're supposed to play the cadenza and don't do anything else. Okay. And also the boldest innovation was the entry of the solo instrument before the ritornello. And ritornello is a musical section that alternates with different episodes of contrasting material. Okay, so I'm going to play a little bit of the Beethoven's 5th piano concerto, The Emperor, which is one of his most famous pieces. Okay, so just, I don't know if you know this piece, but this is a very famous piece.
Earn up to $350 with the BMO Family Bundle.
With the BMO Family Bundle, when one of you has a BMO account, the rest.
Just a second. It's trying to get organized here. Okay, just a second. Here we go. Beethoven's 5th concerto. Very famous pianist. So it starts off with the pianist, the soloist, right from the beginning, showcasing them as a performer. Very dramatic orchestra in the background accompanying them. Lots of flashy and virtuoso piano technique being shown off. Films. Very beautiful piano technique. And still the piano is the main instrument 2 minutes into the piece. And now the orchestra takes over. Pretty big orchestra. Melodies are shared between instruments. Okay, and that's that for his piano concerto. Okay, so the piano. Okay, so this piano concerto, there's much that is ahead of its time in this last and largest of the Beethoven's piano concertos. Very virtuosic, dynamic range is huge, and basically this wasn't written for the kind of piano that Beethoven had. Okay, so that's it for this concerto. Okay, so we just have a few more minutes. We have 8 more minutes. I'm just going to talk to you about a few more of Beethoven's innovations. So let's talk a little bit about the piano sonata. So do you guys know how many piano sonatas he wrote? He wrote 32 piano sonatas. So so in the piano sonatas, he explored his bravest and most inner thoughts. And during his time, piano was still in the early stages of development, and he used striking improvisatory techniques as elements of constructions. So one of the most famous innovations that he did was he transferred the structural weight of the first in the piano sonata of the first movement to the finale. So usually in the piano sonata there's maybe like 3 movements, and he introduced the third movement, the scherzo movement, instead of the minuet in the trio, which was already known before, and both are in 3/4 time, but the scherzo moved much faster. Okay, so his imagination was influenced by the changes that the piano was experiencing in the early 1800s. And the piano had back then a widened range with more notes added to the bass and the treble, a sustained pedal that was added. Before that, they didn't even have pedals. They would use knee levers, which led to much more possibility of resonance, dynamic range, and the attack. Okay. So I'm just going to read a little bit about the Hammerklavier. So the Hammerklavier Piano Sonata is the Piano Sonata Opus 106. So at the climax of his Hammerklavier Sonata Opus 106, there is a monolithic fugue that hollers with physical intensity that contemporary audience might have sounded genuinely noisy and shocking. The same can be said of abstract montage-like structure and stark timbral contrast of Beethoven's last sonata. Okay, so his other innovations was that he invented the freestanding concert overture. Do you guys know anything about the overture? So before Beethoven, the overture was associated very much with the opera. And so basically he invented the overture as its own form, as its own composition or a piece. And a new musical form that he created. And the famous ones were Coralion, King Stephen, and Namensfair. And those were the starting points of evolution of the overture in the 19th century. And another thing that he did, he invented the song cycle. So the arrival of the integrated song cycle, there was a set of songs connected to each other. And the first one that he wrote was An die Ferne Geliebte. And yeah, that's it. So he broke so many things. He broke so many rules. He was pretty much an innovator of his time, like the Beatles. So do you guys have any questions for me about this masterclass? I have like a few minutes I can answer. Anything that was unclear or some comments? Did you guys like it? How did you feel about it? I'm going to give you some information about me. If any of you are interested in like piano lessons, or if you want to know more about me or my concerts, I do a lot of live streams. I'm going to give you my information. So here's my website. This is me, Jelena Cingara. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, like there was one comment that said that I was sometimes not clear. As you know, I'm trying to be as clear as possible. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit better at playing than I am at speaking. I'm not a public speaker, but I try to make it the most interesting and the most fun that I could for you guys, so you can enjoy Beethoven and his music. I think, if you give me positive comments about this masterclass, we can do this again sometime, and I can play for you. I can play some samples for you. This was mostly a tryout first, but of course I can play a lot of Beethoven's music. I played a lot of his sonatas. I played some of his concertos as well. I performed like in Europe as well, and like yeah, so I'm very interested in that. If you guys are more interested in that, I'll be more than open to doing it. Or if you excellent idea. Or if you guys want to take lessons with me, or if you want to hear some more of my music, because sometimes I do live streams online. Somebody keeps asking me if I can play. I can play next time. I think my next masterclass, if this goes well, will be probably in the next few months. So I can play for you then. But I have no problem with playing. It's just that this was like supposed to be a little bit of a different experience. Yeah. So thank you so much. So many positive comments. Yes. I tried to make it the most interesting as possible. Okay, Asher, you can. Here's also my email if you want to contact me. I do Zoom lessons with my email. So yeah, I teach actually a lot of piano students right now from California. This was really interesting. I try to do live streams. I can't do as many as possible, but like I'm hoping that live concerts will come back soon so I can start performing again. Basically in March, I had before all this hit, I had 5 concerts planned. I was in New York City having the time of my life. And then this thing hit, and you know how it has been for artists since then. It has not been so great, but I really enjoyed this with you guys. I enjoyed interacting with you, and hopefully this will give you some more positive light to Beethoven and his music. And feel free to go and listen to Beethoven's recordings, go to concerts, go to you can read more about him. You can go and go on Amazon and order his conversation books, and that must be really, really interesting. Or you can read a biography of him. He was a very, very fascinating person. So thank you so much for for this coming to this masterclass, and I might see you again sometime. Thank you so much. Bye everybody. Bye. Thank you.